Cheeseheads. Get on your feet. It's Curd and Long. Hosted by Sparky, Fifer, and Ryan Horvath.
Welcome in, and there's another edition of Curd and Long. Steve Sparky Fifer with you, 1250 a.m. The Fan, beautiful Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Check out all the interviews I do throughout the course of the week over at 1250amthefan.com. Lots and lots of draft coverage here in the last week between the Curd and Long podcast. We had Ian Cummings on Friday from Pro Football Network, the website I'm addicted to, doing a million mock drafts every day. I do one before bed every night like a child, but that's what I do. Being joined today by another big draft guy who is our draft expert. Back in the day on the Wendy's Big Show, he would come on and break down all the different players and all that fun stuff. I follow him at Jacob Morley of the Packer Report, and of course catch him on the Pack a Day podcast as well, as Ryan Horvath has the day off. Jacob, thanks for coming on, man. Appreciate it.
Dude, thanks for having me. And draft season is upon us. Like we're there, man. We got combine coming up. All these numbers going to be rolling in. I know you're like me. You just talked about it. You know, like a kid in a candy store every year. So much fun.
All right. So if you don't know who Jacob Morley is, he was on the Christian Watson train before Christian Watson was on the Christian Watson train at Green Bay. He was all over it and called his shot then. Now, let's talk about this thing that you tweeted out. You said you have the quote. It's called, quote, "My Guys," end quote, is what it's called. Every year you guys do this. So explain what it is, how it works, and then who are your guys last year?
Yeah, it's just kind of like a fun thing for it's really more for like us, you know, the guys that put in all this work. And you know, so guys like me, you know, Jacob Westendorf, Ross Uglum, we put all this work into this Packers draft guide. And every year we pick 7 guys. You know, we watch 300 plus guys, and 7 guys that you're just like, man, I really like this guy. Like maybe I like him maybe more than other people like him. And it's not always like a top 5 pick. Sometimes it's like it's a fullback from North Dakota State. Hunter Lipke was one for me. I was like, I just really like him. I think he's going to be a good football player for a long time in this league. So it's kind of just your way to put a stamp on a guy, and you can kind of look back on it and either look stupid or you look smart, you know, which is kind of like the whole process, how this thing works.
Everybody calls it a crapshoot, the NFL draft. They call the NBA draft to a degree a crapshoot. Major League Baseball, even more of a crapshoot, because you're talking about high school kids having to get through 4 or 5 years of minor league ball before they get to the major leagues to see if that actually pans out and trying to avoid injury. See, and I always say that is not necessarily true, because there are certain personnel guys that are just a lot better than others. Mm-hmm. And for me, one of those guys is John Dorsey. And somebody posted a video of Dorsey and the Chiefs getting ripped when they drafted Patrick Mahomes for taking Mahomes and yada, yada, yada. The Tyreek Hill pick, people were ripping him for that because of Hill's off the field issues or whatever the case may be. Dorsey obviously did great things in Green Bay. Now he's in Detroit as personnel director over there, drafting Iowa guys like he did in Green Bay and making things work there. So there are certain guys that just know it better than others. To me, there is more skill than like when people like to say it's a crapshoot. And I think Jacob Morley is one of those guys, got some skills that go along with it. All right. So Jacob, who were your guys last year and how did we do?
I mean, I'm feeling pretty good. I mean, I write wide receivers for the draft guide. Like that's my main one that I focus on typically. So the last 2 years really, I feel really good about all my guys. I can go back two years ago, my guys, I try to keep it at 3 wide receivers per year. So 2 years ago, my 3, Chris Olave and George Pickens. And they've all been, you know, varying degrees of success in the NFL. This last year, I kind of branched out a little bit more because, you know, Christian Watson, Olave, and Pickens were all top 100 types. Like a lot of people like them. But this last year, Rashee Rice was someone that I really liked out of SMU. I labeled him a tier 1 Packer. I thought Green Bay would be very interested in him. They took Jaden Reed instead of him. And I think both teams are thrilled with the player that they got. But Rashee Rice was one of my guys. Another my guy was Jackson Smith and Jigba. Ended up in Seattle. That was someone that I really, really was hoping Green Bay would take at 13. They did not. They took Van Ness. And honestly, it looks like they were correct in that because Smith and Jigba had a fine rookie year. He was fine. You know, not anything that I think you're doing backflips over, but good. And then my guy at the wide receiver position was Dontavian Wicks, someone out of Virginia last year. And it was, it was towards the end of last season when you really kind of start. And by last season, I mean the 2022 season. When I'm in the DMs talking to other guys, I'm like, hey, you need to watch Dontavian Wicks. Like, this guy is a Packer. And just the way he moves, the way he's built, the way he plays, inside, outside, he'll block. He can, he's the yards after catch ability, all that. Like, it is all right there. It is someone that just screams Green Bay Packer. Made me look smart because they took him. And not only did they take him, he had a really good rookie year. So that was an exciting one. And then I kind of venture out from the wide receivers as well. Couple guys. I'm a North Dakota State guy, so you can call me biased if you want, and that's fine. But I tend to always have an NDSU guy on my guys list. Spoiler alert: there will not be one this year. I had two on last year's, and one of them was the aforementioned Hunter Lipke, the fullback. He did make the Dallas Cowboys team, and played a lot of football for them. And the other guy was Cody Mock, the guard, went to Tampa Bay. He was fine. He was all right. Jair Brown was another one, the safety out of Penn State, just had an interception in the Super Bowl. And then my guy was another Packer, and that was Anthony Johnson Jr. out of Iowa State. Obviously someone that is going to, if the season started tomorrow for Green Bay, like it or not, he'd probably be starting at safety if nothing changes. We'll see what happens with that. I like the kid. I still like the kid. And I think he can be a starting caliber safety in this league. I think he showed flashes of that last year, his rookie season. But there's a lot of football ahead of him and a lot to unfold. So we'll see.
Did you see the video going around? I think it was today of last night or yesterday of last night, something, where it was Jaden Reed and Dontavian Wicks running around without their shirts on, and working out together and that whole deal. For me, and I know how you look at this, but I'm a fan. So when I see stuff like that, I get excited, right? I get excited because you've got teammates that obviously get along well enough to go work out together in the off season. That's just bonding. That's chemistry. That's getting down with each other. Jordan Love at some point here is going to have his guys out working out with him. Again, that's bonding. That's chemistry. That's getting along together. I think all of that stuff is good. If everybody has that one or two dudes on the team that they're working out with that goal of trying to win a Super Bowl together and wanting more than what they have this year, especially these young dudes, and not just say, man, I'm set. I just proved I can play in this league. I don't need to do all this extra crap. I'll just go when they tell me to go, and I'm good to go. This is something else I think that is important to the draft process of trying to find out who really wants it and who is, I like football. I don't know if I love football. I don't know if I really want to do it like that, but I'm blessed with it. God gave me some special talent, so I do it because of that. I see that all the time, and I have over the years in the NBA, guys that wanted to be soccer players, and they're like, too tall, but I do this okay, so I do this. Do I love it? No. I love soccer. This is all right. It pays the bills. Get a lot of that in the NBA. In the NFL, I don't know if you get that as much, but you have to figure out who wants it and who doesn't. And sometimes it backfires if you're wrong, and you think somebody wants it, gets paid, and all of a sudden, nope, they didn't want it after all. They just wanted the paycheck. That's another tricky part, I think, of this draft process of finding those guys that want it, Jacob.
It is. And that's the part that we don't get. I've got guys that go to the East-West Shrine game and, will send me, hey, this, and I've heard it about this class already. There's guys in this class that people are like, I'll tweet about someone and someone will come on and be like, hey, we talked to this guy at the Shrine game or the Senior Bowl. I don't think he likes ball. I think it's kind of like what you mentioned.
Yep.
Like, I won't name names because I don't think that's fair to the players, but,
right.
There's one guy that I was talking about already this year, and someone reached out to me. He's like, I talked to him at the Shrine game. I don't think he really likes football. I think it's just he's good at it. Yep. And I was like, what do you mean? And they're like, well, we were talking about like the physical nature of the game, and he almost sounded like depressed that he has to do that. I'm just like, oh man, that's tough. That's a tough thing to hear from a guy that you're expecting to come be playing a physical game.
Right.
But like Jaden Reed is a great example of a miss. I would categorize him as a miss for me because he's someone last year. I can go back and look at the conversations I had with people. Like, I like him. I think he's a good player. I think he'll be a good 4th or 5th round player. I think he's a good slot that can, has some good vertical ability. I think he's good at the catch point, all this stuff. But I think if you get to sit down with Jaden Reed, and just from watching him his rookie year, and just the great quotes that he had, like the quote after the Atlanta game that they blew, and he said something like, "We're not going to let this break us. We're going to let this make us." And you hear a guy talk like that, and you're just like, okay, I get it. I get why they wanted this guy in the top 50, because you're pairing now all that ability with that dog mentality that I think him and Wicks both have. I think they both proved that their rookie year. So you just never really know when you just turn the tape on. And that's also why you miss on some guys too, where, you can be a 6'5", 230-pound wide receiver that runs a 4.25 and had a bunch of production in college. But when you get to the NFL level, there are guys that are going to make you decide, do you like this or not? Because it's hard. It's not easy anymore. And there's guys that are physically as gifted as you that are psychopaths. Like, I don't know how else to describe some of these guys other than psychopaths. And I mean that in a good way. And I think Jaden Reed is a psychopath. I think he's a competitive psychopath. And those are the guys I want on my team, because, not to get too far off subject, Sparky, but we just watched maybe the biggest psychopath on the planet, number 15 for the Kansas City Chiefs, just drag his team to a Super Bowl win. Like, that guy, there's something different. There are screws loose in his head. And I don't think normal human beings can get to the, for real, like, normal human beings cannot get to that level of competitiveness where it's like, it legit is San Francisco, over my dead body, you're winning this game. And he means it. I mean, you go back to, and I hate to say this because I'm talking about someone that, I'm jealous that he's not the quarterback for the Packers. But, like, look at Michael Jordan, the same guy that wouldn't let his own kids win in games of Monopoly at home because he was too competitive. Like, I bet Mahomes has got some of that in him. And at the same time, bringing it back, you don't know that. You just, even if you can sit down with someone and talk to them, you really don't know that until, you're between the lines on Sunday. It's 2 minutes left in the game. Back to Jaden Reed, are you going to give him, a quick, a slant in the middle of the field? Is he going to make three guys miss and drag a defender into the end zone against Minnesota? Like, that's the psychopath stuff that I want on my team. So I don't know how you measure that throughout this process, but it seems like the Packers are pretty good at identifying those guys.
You use the word psychopath. I would use the word addicted. Somebody that's addicted to the sport, that just cannot get enough. They would call him a gym rat in basketball, right? Somebody that just can't get enough, that just lives, breathes, and eats the sport and wants to get bigger, wants to get faster, wants to get stronger, so they're better on Sundays. Somebody that's just in the playbook. And you go back to Jaden Reed. There's a lot of leadership to that dude as well. Him, later in the season, forgot what game it was. They asked him about what the difference was, and he said, simple. In the beginning of the season, I was kind of going half speed because I wasn't sure which way I was supposed to go on a different route combination or whatever. I was just kind of guessing what I was supposed to do. Now I know where I'm supposed to be, what I'm supposed to do, and I'm running and I'm playing fast. And that's the difference. Now we're all kind of playing fast and we know the playbook. Then the other part of this with Jaden Reed is these wide receivers having their little study sessions in the locker room after games and kind of going over stuff. And then coming in and working with Jordan Love on Tuesdays or whatever the case was, and getting ready on their, what should have been kind of like their off day. They're working to get ready for the next week. Now, will this continue the longer they play in the NFL? Probably not. But last year it happened. And I think this year it would be good for it to happen. And then you look at it from this perspective of, listen, these are a bunch of young, hungry dudes. And if they all have that same heart of a Love, of a Jaden Reed, Dontavian Wicks, and these guys, I mean, sky really is the limit for these guys because now they know the offense. There'll be some changes, right? Because obviously Matt LaFleur did not realize how good Tucker Kraft was. Had no idea whatsoever how good he was. Now he can write him in to what this playbook is going to look like. Him and Musgrave, double tight end sets, both running routes and doing different things. So it's going to look a little bit different next year. But that year of experience and then the success at the end, Jacob, you just cannot put a price on how much that accelerated how good these guys can be and how soon they can get there.
Right. And that was the conversation all year with this young offense. Like, I was very much in the camp of, I wish they would have brought in a veteran receiver. And at about before Halloween, I look smart. I look right. like, God, they should have brought a veteran in because these young guys, I thought the young receiver group was limiting Love's progress, because you go back and watch even now, and I have, and just even the way Love throws the ball the second half of the year, I mean, he's just ripping it. In the first half of the year, it's a lot. It's tentative. It's the release is not as fast. It's slower, and he's aiming, and you just see this stuff, and you're like, is that Love or is that the young receivers? And I think the answer was the young receivers, because after that, really, it was before the Lions game, but really the Lions game when they exploded, right? And then it was just, man, they were money, and they weren't perfect down the stretch either. They still made plenty of mistakes, but they got on the same page, and it seemed like it just was a different guy every week that was able to step up. And credit to Jason Vrabel, the wide receivers coach too, but he had those guys ready, and he got them ready. And I think when you look at this team and you look at the future of this team, Love is the future of this team, no doubt. But this team is going to go as far as these young wide receivers take them. And I think that's going to be the catalyst for this team moving forward, is what is the ceiling for this young group? Because you mentioned it already, like right now, and it could change when contracts start coming into play and who gets paid and stuff like that. Yeah, like sure, that could change. We're probably still 2 seasons away from that. And you go look at these guys, man, they love to celebrate each other's success. Jaden Reed's running into the end zone, trail 20 yards from, by Christian Watson with his hands in the air because he's thrilled that they scored, and he didn't. It appears that none of them care who it is right now, as long as they're being productive. And again, once they start having to pay these guys, that can all change, because, hey, well, I'm not catching my 10 passes a game and I want a new contract. Like that stuff can all come into play. But as of right now, you nailed it. Like these guys, you follow all of them on Instagram or Twitter or whatever, and they're always reposting each other's stuff. They're always commenting on each other's stuff. The vibe in that locker room, from anyone I've talked to this year that was either around it or in the locker room, was, in their own words, very different. And you can go down whatever path you want to with that. But this was a young team, a young, hungry team, like you talked about. There was not a lot of veteran, established guys on this team that didn't have a reason to give up when you're 3-6 or whatever it is. And I think that could be more of a veteran thing, to be kind of, got to pack it in. We'll try again next year. Like these young guys were, for lack of a better term, they're too dumb. They didn't know any better. Like, we're 3-6, whatever. We'll just win 6 of the last 8 or whatever it was. And they did. And so that's the expectation for this team moving forward. And like I said, I think, they're deep in a lot of positions. They got their quarterback. I think their offensive line is better than what people give it credit for. But this group is going to be propelled by the young pass catchers.
I want to talk more about the young pass catchers, and who do we take a this year is on this team next year. Don't draft wide receivers. Don't sign free agent wide receivers. We're running the exact same group back again. I don't know if Jacob Morley shares the same sentiment of this or not. We'll take a quick timeout, come back, and we'll hear from Jacob Morley. Who does he sharpie into that wide receiver room going into next year? That's next here on Curtin Law. Hey, it's Sparky Fifer, 1250 AM The Fan. Check out all the interviews I do over there at 1250 AM The Fan. Being joined in place of Ryan Horvath of BetMGM tonight by Jacob Morley, of course, Packer reporter, writer, as well as Pack-A-Day podcaster. Is that a thing? I don't know. At Jacob Morley on Twitter. And talking about this Packers wide receiving core, and whether or not you can sharpie all of them in. Are they all coming back? As Goody gets to say, the hell with it. I'm bringing everybody back. I'm not going to worry about adding pieces. We're just going to bring everybody back. And if that's not the case, then who gets left out? Who doesn't have a job necessarily guaranteed here? All right, Jacob Morley, your turn. What do we got?
That's tough. That's the question of the offseason, right? Like, they don't need a wide receiver. Okay. Like, does Goody operate underneath those rules? I don't really think he does. 2019, they signed the Smith brothers, give them a lot of money, and draft with, at the time, was like the highest draft pick they had in like a decade. They drafted an edge and Rashawn Gary. So I don't know. Like my buddy Ross Uglin will talk about the Melton Heath line. And that's I kind of buy into that, where it's like, all right, if you're going to take one, you better be dang sure they're better than those guys. And when you talk about Heath and Melton, both really nice young players, like a lot to like when you look at them. A lot of teams would love to have Bo Melton and Malik Heath on their team as their 5th and 6th wide receiver. But, it's pick 25. Brian Thomas Jr. hasn't gone off the board yet for some reason. And if you're not familiar with Brian Thomas Jr., just from the kid from LSU, think, Christian Watson. That's kind of who he is. They're very similar players. Big, long, fast. And I could see Goody sitting in that being like, man, it'd be pretty cool to have Watson and Thomas Jr. on this team, especially with how aggressive of a quarterback Jordan Love is and how he loves to push the ball down the field. Will they do that? I don't know, but I wouldn't be shocked. And I will say this, and I'll say it today. I think the 2 best chances they have at taking a wide receiver in this year's draft class are Brian Thomas Jr. at 25 or Keon Coleman at 41. Because I think both of those guys at that point, they would have slid probably further than where they should have gone. And they are both, I think, going to be very much Packers types. We'll see on the testing. We don't have that yet. But I think that's kind of the cutoff. And why are you taking a guy on day 3 that you don't think is any better than Bo Melton? Why are you taking a guy on day 3 that you don't think is better than Malik Heath? Oh, and by the way, you took a guy named Grant Dubose last year out of Charlotte in the 7th round that you kept all year on the practice squad, who's, in my opinion, a really nice prospect. I liked him a lot coming out of Charlotte. He couldn't make the team last year. So I'm all for, adding competition, and I trust Goody and his staff, especially at wide receiver. If they think a guy is good, I'm just going to, like Jaden Reed last year. When they took Jaden Reed, I was just like, okay, like he's probably good. He's probably better than I think he is because you guys think he's good. And that's just kind of how they operate. So if they take a guy on day 3, and that's the other thing, Sparky, they have 1 billion day 3 picks. So they could take a guy and just be like, hey, throw him in the mix. He doesn't make the team, And we'll keep him on the practice squad, whatever. That's fine. But I just think, man, if they take a guy, so like a guy that I like, a day 3 guy I like, and this is a name people are going to recognize, is Luke McCaffrey out of Rice. I think he's going to be a Packer type. I think he's going to test like a Packer, but I think he's a day 3 guy. And I don't know if he's better than Malik Heath or Bo Melton. I don't. But if you add him to the mix, if he makes the team, he earned it. He's going to have to earn it. So there's something to be excited about. If you're knocking off Melton or Heath, you earned it. And, that's just kind of where they're at right now. It's a great spot to be in. And all these guys are young. But the other thing, like the devil's advocate part of it too, though, is Malik Heath. Like, nice player, made some nice plays. Jarrett Boykin was once a guy like that, right? They've had other guys that across the league that come in and you're like, oh, this guy's going to be awesome. He was good as a rookie, and then they kind of fall off. Bo Melton was on the practice squad all year and was great down the stretch, but it was like, we're talking like a 3-game stretch. Guys sometimes do that and then fall off a cliff. So like, I don't think we can necessarily just be like, hey, these guys are locked in because they flashed as rookies. We'll see. And I mean, before the playoff run, I was kind of in the camp of like, what does Romeo Doubs do here? Like, what does he really do? Do you dangle him as trade bait this offseason and say, like, what you going to give his reps to Wicks? Now, the playoffs did happen, and he was awesome. He was incredible in the playoffs. So, like, maybe not. Maybe, I mean, he did stuff in that Dallas playoff game that I didn't know he had in his bag. So, it's just they have an embarrassment of riches right now at the position. I live in Kansas City. I talk to a lot of the Kansas City writers, and they're constantly talking to me like, who's not going to make the team in Green Bay because we want to pick that guy up. What is the formula that Green Bay has to just draft these receivers and turn them into stars? Because granted, the Chiefs are Super Bowl champions, but that's not necessarily something they were able to do this year. Rashee Rice was good, but that was about it. And they couldn't just plug in anyone and play them like Green Bay did this year. Oh, and Green Bay, by the way, plugging and playing these young receivers with a first-year starter at quarterback. So, I think what you're going to hear a lot this year, Sparky, from me and other, Packers writers is the Melton Heath line. And do you think this guy is better than those two? Because I think those are really the only two guys you can look at and say, are they going to, you're going to have to beat them out, because Wicks isn't going anywhere. Dobbs is probably not going anywhere. Reed's definitely not going anywhere. Christian Watson probably not going anywhere. I know, Andy Herman over at Packaday did kind of a wacky trade scenario type thing, and Christian is probably has the most trade value among this wide receiver group. If you did, let's say if Brian Thomas Jr. did fall to 25, and they were like, well, maybe we move on from Christian because Brian Thomas Jr. we're thinking he's going to be a healthier version of Christian Watson. I would keep both and just say, let the other teams have to deal with it. But, there's a lot of different scenarios. But what we know about the Packers is they usually are just going to say, we'll just take all the guys. We'll just take all the guys and we'll figure it out, because that's kind of what they've done in the past. We'll roster 7 receivers, and if we think they all can play at certain points in the year, just like last year, they all did play. Malik Heath started games for this team at points last season, and then by the playoffs, Melton had kind of taken his spot. So, it's a long year. There's a lot of bodies that you need to get through an NFL season. And I think the wide receiver position is interesting too, Sparky, because it's almost becoming valued increasingly, but at the same time decrease in value, because it seems like you need to have 3, 4, 5 guys that can play in today's NFL. And a lot of teams have that many guys, and there's a lot of really good receivers out there. But we'll see. The Packers are kind of one of the teams in the NFL that I think you look at them. Minnesota's really good at identifying wide receiver talent. Pittsburgh's really good at it, and I think Green Bay is really good at it. I think those are the 3 teams you kind of look at, and you're like, maybe we steal what they're doing because they got a good formula.
I'll be honest. I never crossed my mind to trade a wide receiver at any point this offseason. I've been on the train of I don't really want a wide receiver in this draft. I'm one of those weirdos that say, just bring everybody back. Let's just play. But now that you bring it up, with 2 tight ends like they have, which I'm not sure who else in the NFL have 2 tight ends like what they're probably going to have here. And what you're able to do with those 2 tight end sets, you may not need as much a wide receiver as some of these other teams have to have. Just go back and I'm not saying they're Gronkowski and Hernandez, but 2 dueling type tight ends that can be impact players down the field at the same time. I mean, trading a Watson or a Dobbs or something along those lines, if you go back to what you said, I think it makes sense. If you were able to get Thomas out of LSU and then all of a sudden say the Chiefs at the end of one, we're willing to give you that pick at the end of the first round for Christian Watson, and you get a 1 for Christian Watson, essentially you upgrade for a guy that can't stay in the field and can't stay healthy. And now you're able to take, the top safety at that point, depending on who is left at that point. If there's a safety that you want, in addition to, helping your defense, you get the player that you may have taken at 25, at 32, and you still get a wide receiver that, like you said, is more healthy. I can't see them trading their wide receivers or tight ends at this point, even though they have a lot of depth. I would be shocked if Goody moved on, especially after all this stuff from LaFleur about, we're going to do all this extensive work on making sure we can figure out what the problem with Christian Watson's hamstrings are. And we're going to do this and we're going to do that. After all that talk from LaFleur, I would be stunned if they traded anybody from that wide receiver core at this point.
Yeah. I mean, and we're talking hypotheticals, right? Like, I would be shocked because the other thing is they're cheap. They're all cheap right now. Yeah, and so if you were to trade a Dobbs or a Watson, you probably would do it going into a contract year, not with 2 years left on their rookie deal. It doesn't make a lot of sense. It just doesn't, unless Kansas City or someone comes in, and I don't think they would, although Christian Watson torched Kansas City. They might have that lasting memory in their head.
Christian Watson and Rice out there together,
That's not
man.
fair. I hope that doesn't happen just because that seems unfair.
Mahomes would
to
go
everyone.
nuts.
Yeah, but that would be at least something you would have to consider. Is like, man, 32. Who could we get? Who's on the board? I probably still wouldn't. I mean, you drafted Christian at 34 2 years ago, so it's kind of
what about this? What if it's Indy at 15?
Oh, 15th overall pick for Christian Watson? I mean, there's no way they do that, but I mean,
Michael Pittman's a free agent. Now, everybody assumes they're going to, right, sure. But he's not, in my opinion, and because I'm a Colts fan too, he's not a game changer, nothing like that. He's a nice number one, but he doesn't have elite type stuff like Watson seems to possess in his body at this point. If Watson can stay healthy, he's going to be a better player, in my opinion, than Pittman at the end of the day.
Oh, I think so. Yeah. And I think you look at the high level stuff that Christian Watson's done, and that's the exciting stuff. If I'm Indianapolis and if I'm like, hey, can we guarantee that Christian Watson's going to be healthy? Then maybe you dangle that 15th pick. Maybe. I still don't think they would, but he hasn't stayed healthy. I'm as big of a Christian Watson fan as anyone, but they need to fix that. They need to figure that out, because it would be one thing if he was getting hurt and not doing jack squat when he's on the field, but it's the opposite. He's getting hurt and being a he's a top 8 type receiver in this league when he's healthy. And I think people need to recognize that, like, they do need to figure this out, because he is that number one type guy that they can run the offense through. And then you talk about, man, Christian is kind of the deep decoy sometimes that they hit. He can do the middle of the field stuff, but man, in that Dallas game is a great example of, I think it was one of the very first plays of the game. Christian has 3 guys go with him, and then Romeo is just wide open on the Dallas Cowboys star. Like, that's what he brings to this offense. And then you talk about the tight ends work in the middle of the field. Holy cow. I mean, you can daydream until the cows come home about this offense, because they have every which way to beat a team. And let me tell you something here, because this is my fever dream. So there's a guy named Malachi Corley out of Western Kentucky.
Yep.
He's not quite a Packers type. He's a little bit short. They like him to be at least 5'11". He's like 5'10"-ish, but he's built like a running back. And he can play running back. He can also run routes and play receiver. He calls himself like the yak god or something like that. And he is. Like, he can think small school Debo Samuel. Like, that is how he's. Debo was more refined coming out of South Carolina than Malachi Corley is. Like, don't get that twisted. But I'm just daydreaming of 12 personnel. So you have Musgrave and Kraft on the field. You have Christian out wide. You have Wicks or Dobbs or Reed on the other side. And then you have Malachi Corley lined up in the backfield. And he's good enough as a runner that you can just turn around and hand the ball off to him, because you're going to get light boxes in this look. Or maybe, I don't know, the defense is going to have to decide. You can kind of just pick and choose what you want to do. Hand the ball off to him. Take your 6 yards. Cool. Split them out wide. Put them in the slot. Depending on whatever the defense is doing. If this offense wants to play multiple and they want to be able to just dictate the game in any way that they want, take Malachi Corley out of Western Kentucky and see kind of the fun stuff that Matt LaFleur would do with that guy in this offense. And that's the other thing. Bring it back to the wide receiver conversation. Take a guy that you don't have. This group has got about everybody, but they don't have a guy like that. Jaden Reed a little bit, could probably do that a little bit, but Jaden Reed is a $195 soaking wet. Corley is a legit 215, 220. And he is, that's bigger than Aaron Jones. So that gets me excited. And he's a guy that, and also Sparky, they have 5 picks in the top 100. Take something that doesn't make sense. Just funny money, right? Like, go make a pick that everyone's going to go like, why did you do that? And be like, because he's good, because it's going to be cool. Like, do that. Like, I want to see at least one pick that is not conventional. That is, and it could be a running back too. Like taking a running back in the top 100 when you have Aaron Jones. Like, I think a lot of us that watch this team understand they need a running back too. But go get one. Just have fun with something.
Yeah, I want the kid out of Oregon. That's who I want. And I don't give a damn if you take him. I don't care if you take him in the second round. That's who I'm. Bucky Irving. That's who I want. I am not messing around. That's who I want.
I watched him yesterday.
End of story. That dude is a stud, man.
I got done watching him and immediately went to the draft chat and said, like, Bucky Irving is a top 5, like, most fun watch in this year's draft.
Yes.
And if you want, and that was you got to talk about the running backs, and like with Dillon and Jones, they're like, oh man, thunder and lightning. We got to have that thunder and lightning. You know what's better than thunder and lightning? Like 2 Aaron Jones. Like, just give me 2 of those guys. And you watch Bucky Irving, and that's who he reminds me of. He's just a pinball. Because Aaron Jones is a smaller guy, and he's got, like, it cracks me up. It reminds me of like Jamal Charles when he was in the league too, because both slider frame guys, and it just looks like a bobblehead, just like running through and not being able to get tackled, bouncing off guys. That's Bucky Irving. I think Bucky Irving, though, is a better receiver out of the backfield than Aaron Jones is. So he would be a fun player for next year's team too.
Yeah, I'd love to see him in the second round. I absolutely would. Let's have to wait and see how this whole thing plays out. Jacob Morley, he is a writer for the Packer Report. Of course, check him on the Pack a Day podcast as well. Follow him on Twitter at Jacob Morley. That'll do it for another edition of Curd and Long. Download it on your Odyssey app, wherever you download your favorite podcast at. Also on YouTube with the Odyssey Sports YouTube page. We live stream these bad boys most of the time. Like, subscribe, follow, hit the bell for notifications, all that fun stuff. Jacob, thanks so much for coming on, man. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Sparky. Talk to you next time.